What I find really fascinating about you is you've built a successful business, but from my perspective, it also seems like you show up as a very present husband and father. So I'd love to understand like how you were able to do that, but also like what were the challenges with trying to do that?
I mean, there's still challenges, right? Number one, as a parent, I think a good parent many times questions what's the next step or how can I help with this, whether it's high school to college to homework to, not ignoring the middle child. And no matter what your decisions are, every kid is different. And, you question yourself. And a lot of people feel bad, like they failed. But when that happens, I don't look at it like I failed. I just like business, like, hey, certain failures, they're small failures that help you grow. And so I think if you're always thinking that you're doing something right and you're not making a mistake, then, maybe you're not challenging yourself to be a better parent. If you're constantly questioning your decisions, that's not always a bad thing. Don't we always question our decisions in business? You should question it. If you just blindly trust, thanks to the universe, it may not work out in your favor. You need to make some course corrections. That's why people look at quarterly earnings and monthly stats and, things that did work for 5 years, maybe all of a sudden doesn't because of AI or, so the times change and you have to constantly question what your kids are doing and what the strategies are. So I would say the first step is to just be at peace with that. You don't have to like how it feels. And then when you take a look back, probably start developing this, muscle memory of, wow, most of my decisions did turn out pretty good. Could I have done them better? Yeah, maybe I'll give someone else some different advice. But for the most part, looking at it from the 30,000-foot view, we've done a pretty good job. Are there a few things we might have done differently? Looking back, yeah, maybe. But I don't know if that answers your question. But I mean, there's so many angles you could talk about on this.
Yeah.
You go back to the entrepreneur aspect. Well, not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur. But if you're going to go down that road and at least for me, I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad helped me, my mom and dad helped me with mental support, just being there as a shoulder to cry on when things were difficult. Gave me a little bit of money for a build out on our clinic. But, we didn't come from a big family of wealth and I couldn't get a loan from a bank. So I had to really, really kind of grow very, very slowly those first couple of years. I just didn't have the budget to market more. So I had a lot of grassroots and just going around and doing talks and kind of take care of that next person in front of you. That's a good market. People's like, what's the best marketing strategy? I'm like, you know what? Your next client. Take really good care of your next client. And that's probably regardless of how technology changes, that'll stand the test of time. Because no matter how good you rank on AI or ChatGPT or Google, like if you're not good, eventually that shows.
Yeah.
So when you're an entrepreneur, and you get good at it, sometimes you can feel a little bit obsessive, right? You love it so much and you fall in love with the things that you hate. Like when I first started my practice, I hated marketing. We didn't train how to market. And everyone said, I don't want to learn that. I don't want to learn accounting. I don't want to learn how to figure out who's the best accountant. I just want to take care of patients or whatever it is that you do. Maybe you're, opening an HVAC business. I just want to give people a good, heating and air conditioning. Yeah, but if you don't do a good job of hiring the right people and, having a good system and procedures, then, you're going to take away from the care itself. So getting those systems in place and people in place that kind of you buy into and you trust and you take care of, not every business has the turnover rate that we have. We don't have a lot of turnover with our employees. Then you're able to create this sense of balance that you can then go be with your family and then be at work. And then when you're on vacation, you're on vacation. You're not worrying about the office when you're on vacation. I make it sound so easy, right? It's not like, if there was some program that could be in my brain and show you what percentage of time on vacation I'm thinking about work, for me, I think I do a pretty good job of it. But some years I worry about it more than others, right? Problems happen when you're away. There's no perfect solution, but only you can tell. It's like, hey, this needs to be better. And I think a lot of people want to be more time with their family. And some of them actually can, whereas other people with poor systems can't get away. They're sort of a slave to their own business. Their systems are poor, so it's so dependent on them physically being present. That kind of ties them to their business. And I've been guilty of that as well, especially in those first 5 or 10 years of our practice. But the second 10 to 15 years, much less of the case. But in order to get there, I had to overcome my fear of just leaving. Leave, go on vacation, trust the new person that comes in, trust the new doctor we hired, trust the new staff. Will they do as good of a job as I was there? Probably not. But when I come back, it's like, oh, it was really about the same. Maybe we went down 10% on our volume or collections, but then within a week or two, it was like I never left. So the recovery was strong, right?
Cool.
Once you built that muscle, and I started very early, almost earlier than I should have. I mean, my wife and I think we went to Italy, my first year of practice. I didn't even have the money to go to Italy. I was just paying back student loans. Credit cards in the U.S. are pretty easy to come by. We met traveling. We just needed to get away. And I remember my dad being like, how are you going to Italy? You're barely profiting yet.
Yeah.
It was probably not a smart financial decision, but just mentally, I felt like if I just got away, I would feel rich in my soul and I'd come back and I'd power through for another year.
It's a good way to do a test too, right? Like you can see, you leave for a weekend or a month and you start to see where the leaks are happening and where they wouldn't have if you were there.
Yeah, exactly. We call that the leaky bucket. You kind of pack it and see where the leaks are at. You don't know until you test the system, but you kind of want to test small before you test big, so
yeah.
Someone who never takes vacation probably isn't a good idea to be like, I'm going to take a month off.
Yeah.
Maybe you start with a long 4-day weekend, get used to the anxiety of that and then come back, see what happened and then plan for the next one, build that muscle. So anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is when you test that enough, your systems and your people, then you are able to be with your family more.
From like kind of like a 30 feet out, what I kind of hear is like maybe in the beginning you don't necessarily have that ultimate balance that you would love because you're building those systems, but I guess like the priority is to build those systems and test them so that you can get to a place where you have more of that balance. That's like
yeah,
that's
I think that's great too. And it's like look, there's no one right path. I mean, again, if someone comes from a family of wealth and they can travel around the world in their early 20s,
yeah,
go do it, man. If you're not sure what you want to do and you're like, I want to make a lot of money, I want to be an entrepreneur, fantastic, go do it. But
yeah,
like, why would you not see the world if you have that opportunity? I wanted to do so much more of that. Just didn't have the wealth to do it, right? So we had to kind of put some of that on hold and do it as we accrued. Because I see a lot of young people coming out, regardless of their socioeconomic background, they want to hustle and grind and like retire by the time they're 40, there's like, you guys have mnemonics for it, and I'm like, well, why? Like, what's the end goal here? To like not have to work and sit on a beach and like kite surf for 50 years without challenging your brain?
yeah.
Like, I just think people aren't really thinking about the long-term process. People will go get 6-year degrees for some profession and they've never even sat down in an office of the profession they're studying for. You just spent 6 years of your life before, and then it's like, oh, now I'm going to be an accountant or a surgeon, whatever. And then you realize, oh, I can't stand this. I got to get up at 4 a.m. to get ready for surgery. I always, I don't even like blood. I don't know. I wish more people had a chance to, have a mentor or an internship program like in high school or 19, 20, 21, so they can just get a vibe of like, hey, is this a lifestyle I could see myself in? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. What was your process like in the beginning, 25 years old? Like how did you find this thing that ended up working out pretty well?
Well, we grew up with it. Yeah, my mom was ahead of her time and we went to a bunch of natural doctors rather than traditional doctors. So that, and everyone's got some story, but
yeah,
I just said, some people just test it and they like it and they kind of like it. It all works out for them. But I don't know. I just don't think enough thought goes in your younger years on testing things. And even just doing random things until you kind of know, well, I don't like that. Just get out, meet people. I worked a lot of odd jobs, in high school and in college. I mowed lawns and had paper routes, and I worked for Maytag in college and, delivered washers and dryers. I worked at a fine dining restaurant. I worked at a call center,
cool,
talking to farmers about what seeds they should plant because I had a degree in genetics and biology. I was kind of delaying going back to school to become a doctor of chiropractic because I knew once I did that, I'd have to get real serious. Then I'm locked into that long journey. So I was trying to, and I think all those little odd jobs helped me be a people person, and just dealing with so many different types of humans from all walks of life. And then, just meeting someone from another country and kind of expanding my horizons and, to me, if most people, if they could just get the chance to travel to a couple different countries and see how things operate, I think you just become a better human. And it's easier said than done. it worked out for me, but I always tell young people, if you could just, do a semester abroad or get a 2 week ticket to Europe or drive across the border and go to Canada. Most people don't do that. I want to say in the States, I want to say the last stat I saw was 38% of Americans have a passport.
Whoa,
Yeah, yeah, 38%. And I
that's
get it.
crazy.
Some people just don't have the financial means to travel. I get that. And that's not something I'm certainly not trying to make light of that. But there's a lot of people that have the financial means. It's not a goal.
Yeah.
And you leave and you appreciate your home. You realize all the great things that you do have, and you also realize that wow, a lot of other countries have a lot of things right too, and they're really good at this. And that's a problem we kind of have here in the States. While I'm a very proud American, you're sort of raised here thinking that like my country's the best at everything. We're, you know, and we are good at a lot of things, but like other countries are too.
Yeah.
And,
Gets you out of that bubble that you're just
it,
so used to.
I think for any entrepreneur, having that wherewithal of that world travel gives you, it's a helpful tool in life.
Yeah.
I think that's something that I wish more people who were going through education processes were a part of. More internships, trying odd jobs, seeing what things are like before you finish the 6, 8, 12-year degree, and then just traveling, meeting other people and from other countries. And I think if everyone was doing that, we probably wouldn't have all the problems we have in the world.
Hmm.
You
I
know,
love the quote from Steve Jobs. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. So you kind of just have to like trust your gut, trust your heart, and
yeah.
go with it. And I can't even completely explain it, but I've done a little bit of traveling, and like my big travels were Bali and Barcelona, and
Yeah.
those two
That's where I met my wife in Barcelona.
Really? A great
Yeah.
place. Wow, what an amazing
Yeah.
place to meet your wife. Just like getting out of my bubble of where I've grown up, where I've lived around my friends, meeting different people, having these experiences, like seeing a completely different culture. I can't even fully put it to words, but it coming back here, not only did it, especially being in Bali, like not only did it help me not take what I have for granted, the privilege that I have here, but also just like having the experiences that I wouldn't have, meeting the different people that I can't really say how it's going to help me in my future, but maybe later on I'll be able to connect those dots and be like, hey, when I went to Bali, that helped with this, or the person I met here connected me here. Like you'll never really know. And that's what excites me about travel and getting out of the bubble.
Yeah, I'll tell you as you said Bali, so I'm assuming that you saw some of the third world parts of that. I
Yeah.
spent some time, we go to South America a lot, and I spent some time in the Amazon jungle.
Cool.
Um, and as you spend time in the third world, always, I think one of the things that helps me the most, I learned a lot from my wife too, is here in North America, probably more so in the States than Canada, similar, because you don't realize how, comfortable you have it compared to third world. You just sort of get used to comfort, and you also get used to things. And I'm not against capitalism. Is there some better way to live government wise? Maybe. I don't know. I'm just saying that when you learn how to be very, very happy with less, it's a really healthy place to be, because I don't care what level you're at of wealth or business, or, how many millions you have. Like you mentioned Steve Jobs. You don't think you don't think that guy had tons of stress, like he was going to lose his business like
He was a
every day?
psycho, man. Like,
So
yeah.
just everybody, especially entrepreneurs, everyone's going to have a moment, no matter how much you're killing it or growing or profiting. You're just going to have a moment where you have fear that it's going to like, oh no, I got to readjust. There's small problems, there's big problems, there's things that can cut your legs off. COVID, for example, was a very big problem for a lot of businesses, never recovered from that, right? But no matter how much if you're not saving and living beneath your means, you're always spending about as much as you make, either recreationally or for things or for second homes or your kids' school, or you're just always going to have more stress. So you have to be very, very wise about how many things should I accumulate, right? As far as how much expenses they are. So, for example, my wife and I, we live here in Chicago, and as we had 3 kids and they got older, and now 2 of them are teenagers, I always thought we were going to need to live in a big farmhouse. That's how I grew up in the country. She always lived in high rises, so she never had a goal to move to a house here in Chicago. Well, you're in Vancouver. Vancouver is very expensive too. I mean, a house in downtown Vancouver could be $2 to $5 million,
Mm-hmm.
right? But regardless, if you don't need it and you can be just as happy in a place that costs half that or a quarter of that, wouldn't you just have less stress?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not saying if people are really into real estate and they want to make their wealth through real estate, great, go buy things, rent them. I'm just saying, are we really questioning what we're buying and why and what our kids are watching? Because then when life throws you a curveball and changes the market and your business model gets chopped by 20%, and you can't live that same lifestyle. Coming down in lifestyle is always hard on people, right? Going up is easier.
Oh
But
yeah.
when you go down, it's hard. So just to avoid, because most people have, some sort of financial stress every single day of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I think they say people concern themselves with money every 60 seconds that they're awake, at
Crazy.
least adults. And so if most of those concerns that you have are neutral to positive, that's going to really help your health and your energy and be able to sleep at night. Um, and if you're, constantly trying to take massive risks and buying things, then whatever your business model is to earn, and it just takes a couple different changes, and all of a sudden now you're stressed. And when you're stressed, you make bad decisions. So you go back to world travel. I just think, I like to travel to places that have less. I like to take my kids to places where you have to use mosquito nets and there's no air conditioning, so they can learn what it's like to live uncomfortably before we see whatever beautiful spot that place is known for. And it's like, hey, this is how a lot of people live around the world, if not most people. So, and they're still very happy, right? So let's just be really careful how we want to spend our money, which, assuming you made it legally, your money is just way you're paid for your efforts. Let's not waste all those efforts on meaningless things that we don't really need. And not everyone may see it that way, but my wife and I tend to be, at least for our level of business and growth, like I would say most people think we would be a minimalist.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool. I like to see it too, is like, for me personally, and everybody's different, but I see like money kind of as a tool, and it in a sense like gets your time back. And so it's like there's a certain threshold where I feel like if you have a certain amount of wealth, you kind of have that time back to spend with your family or to travel or to do more things. And I think that, like, for me, it's like, what is the point of pushing past what that threshold is, because then what you've gotten the thing, which is time that we all want to spend time with family and all those other things, like I said. But what's after that, like what even would be?
Yeah, look, you'll continue to have those questions.
Yeah.
Whatever questions you're having in your 20s will probably be answered by your 30s. Then you'll have new questions that'll be answered because life is not static,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
dynamic. So the questions keep changing,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And then as you get, and I'm really into health and wellness. So while I don't feel really much older than I did at 36, I know that I am. And, my biological age would be the same as someone who's 20 right now, because if we both, live a certain amount of time, the biological scale is different than the actual scale. So, but as you kind of get closer to, I'd say 50 and above, like, you do start to see the world just a little bit differently and not care as much about the rat race. You just start caring more about other people and legacy and how can you help those around you. That's probably less of the case if you're constantly, living paycheck to paycheck. You're not going to be able to help a lot of other people if you're worried about money all the time. So again, going back to my point, regardless of socioeconomic scale, what are we spending our money on and why? Like a lot of people here in the States, I'm sure Canada too, are always getting new cars. Like, why? Like, cars last like 10, 15 years. Like, why would you have another $500,000, $800,000 payment if cars aren't your number one hobby? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It creates more stress for them. So, yeah, I just think you did just be, not everyone's meant to be a minimalist, but whatever you're spending the money on, is it in agreement with your spouse? And I've made those mistakes when I got married in my 20s, and wife and I got in some fights about money purchases and things like that. You have to be on the same page. It's probably the number one reason people get divorced. And I'm not saying you don't have to, it's okay to disagree with your spouse. You can get mad every now and then. Most of the time money can get in the way. You need to be on the same page. So, for example, my wife came from a country that had like a bank collapse. Uruguay, Argentina, southern Brazil. In the early 2000s, it didn't matter how much money you had in the bank. You couldn't get it out. They were in like their version of the Great Depression. So she went through that as a teenager, saw the stress her parents had. Her parents were both entrepreneurs. So her trust in banks is pretty low. Here in the States in 2008, our FDIC insured was very close. That's when we bailed out a lot of companies. You might be a little too young to remember that. But people were very worried. Their pensions got cut in half. Their retirement plans got cut in half. People thought they were going to retire at 65, and now they would never be able to retire. And that was less than 20 years ago. Because of that, we wanted to make our biggest investment our business. We had more control over our business than we did the stock market and someone else's business. That we don't know who's making those decisions. We don't know what their values are. We don't know if their CEO is going out and getting high on cocaine at night. It's just certain things we can't know. And so I'm not trying to scare people from the stock market, but for an entrepreneur, probably your biggest investment is going to be your own business. You have more control over that. Now, as you have more to play with, and if you're saving and not spending it on new cars and new houses all the time, you got a little bit of a cushion. Okay, I get it. You want to make a better return? Maybe you put some of these different. Find a financial investor that you trust. And the financial investor I had at the time, while he was suggested that I be a lot more aggressive, I just said, look, I married in to a family that is very conservative. And if I was single, I would definitely do that more aggressive move. I want to, but I'm not, because I know it'll make my wife nervous. And if it doesn't work out, the damage it will have on our relationship isn't worth it. I'd rather retire with a couple million less.
Wow. I love that. I love that decision-making process. I guess it changes too, like you said, once you have somebody else, like a wife. I want to go touch into the business side of things a little bit. And so you went to school, and then you made that decision to kind of all in on the business thing. That's where you're going to put your money and time.
Yeah.
What like take me back to the beginning when you did start. Like, what were some of the principles or values that you had that allowed you to succeed in business now?
Well, I definitely think I picked the right partner, right? She was very resilient. I think, we struggled. It was hard. It was not easy the first couple of years. I'd be lying to you if I didn't wake up and, cried a couple times a week in the shower, just like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know what I'm doing. How do I do better? But just resiliency, I've never given up. And I think I'm a pretty optimistic person, but I had this tough as nails Uruguayan gal that just kind of had went through her own struggles. That she grew up in a dictatorship. Right now, Uruguay is very safe right now, but when she grew up, it was still a dictatorship. And my wife's side of the family, they immigrated to Uruguay from Poland. They were basically fleeing Poland before the Holocaust. They're of Jewish descent, and so there was just a lot more strife and struggle that their family had to do to be successful in Uruguay. So just having that life partner that was willing to kind of hustle and grind and not worry how much we had, just keep doing it because we're doing it for the right reasons, and just every year we grew, right? But if I would have had someone that I have to have, the new Ender Scott purse and, just need to be pampered all the time. It had to have all these flashy wealth things, materialism things. They probably wouldn't have stayed with me. They probably wouldn't have believed in me. They probably wouldn't have been able to see like, oh, you're going to make it someday. We're going to be a staple of our community, help a lot of people, and, raise our kids like this natural, healthy life. It's like she was just all in. So and not every businesses are something that you'd be, maybe you just, sell some, what we call widgets, fixtures for hoses. Well, you're not going to be all in on that business. Your spouse just supports you in that business. But certain businesses you can have more personal passion about, and it carries over into your personal life. We're very into eating clean and exercising and being spiritually connected and, minimizing our technology and just doing whatever we can to be present in the moment and avoid drugs and surgery at all costs for our body. From Tylenols to everything. So, my kids have never had any medication. My wife works in the ER. We're not against it. It was something we were passionate about. So fortunately, we never had an emergency, but every time we were able to manage something naturally, we did. And we just, so now they're 14, 16, and 11, and they've never had medication. We're proud of that because that's what we do. That's what I do in our office. I'm teaching people how to fix things naturally, kids and adults. But I have other colleagues that do something similar in their practice, but their home life, the spouse isn't on board. Well, they are, but not all in, right? And so there's a little bit of hypocrisy, what you're saying at the office to what you would do at home. You know what I mean? So the congruency there of having a spouse that's all in, I think is a massive reason of why we were successful. It's even helped out in our office until we could make enough money to start paying other people. So it was just her and I that first year and a half. So I hope that answers your question, but I'm not going to give her all the credit. I think I deserve some of it too, but
Yeah.
we were a team. We
That's
were a team.
amazing.
It's interesting that the longer that goes on, and we've been, hired more people and more doctors. There's just years in relationships where you're not as much as of a team. Sometimes the kids are pulling you apart and you're going in different directions, and, baseball and dance and swimming and school. And when they were younger, they used to come into the office more. Now they're all doing their own things. And so there are times where we've fallen off of that and we have to have a discussion. I feel like we're, it's not bad, but it's not like it was. And so you just have to kind of reinvent yourselves. If that makes sense.
Totally. That's such a blessing, like having a partner that's all in like that. And I heard a couple things, like one being like passion in what you're doing, helping in your success. But the biggest one, obviously, that you said about was having a partner that's all in and going to support you through those really, really tough times. How can I go about finding, like, I'm 25, I'm an entrepreneur. Well, sorry, I'm 24, and I would love to find someone like that. How can I assure that I find a partner that is all in? And maybe she doesn't work in my business with me, but has that level of dedication and sees the vision and is able to stick with it and through those times.
When we first met, it might have been you or your friend that was helping out.
Isaac. Yeah.
Isaac,
yeah.
Wasn't he going through, like, he was breaking up with somebody, or they weren't on the mission or something like that?
It was quite the opposite. Like, she was an awesome girl, but it was quite the opposite of what you have in your relationship.
Yeah. So let's kind of just use that as an example. I'm sure he'd be okay with that.
Totally.
Because we already had it recorded, but you lost the footage.
Yeah,
we were
I did.
Yeah. Right. So let's go back to that.
Yeah, for sure.
So first off, they broke up, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. All right. And why'd they break up?
I would say, and I won't go too deep into it, but I would say there was a misalignment between Isaac's a very ambitious entrepreneur and really wants more for himself and doesn't want to settle. And she was a little bit more, she was more taking a more traditional path and was more like focused on security right now.
Yeah.
And those were probably the biggest misalignments. And she also, like, really wanted to, like, hang out all the time and be very, like, do lots of dates, and, like, which would take time away from Isaac building.
Yeah. Well, I think he made the right decision. And look, well, to go back to your question, I don't think you look for it. It just happens, right? And, you strike me as someone who's really into your health and wellness. And you're probably going to live a long time, barring you don't get hit by a bus. So you're not in some huge rush. You also have the luxury of being male, which is you don't have a clock that's ticking. Right. I feel bad for women because they do, and I think they feel a little bit more pressure to find that right person earlier. I haven't really had those chats yet with my girls that are only 14 and 11, but I'm sure those days are coming. My sister-in-law found someone in New York City at like 36 years old and got married and had their first kid at 40 and their second kid at 41.
Awesome.
I mean, it's just, that's for you. That's like 16 years from now.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time. I think I heard, you know who Tony Robbins is?
Yeah.
I heard him say once that people tend to overestimate what's going to get accomplished in a year. Yeah. The younger you are, overestimate what you're going to do in a year. Or you overestimate what you're going to do in a year, and you underestimate what you're going to do in 10. Because you're not old enough yet to have those types of visions. Some people are, it's rare. You're kind of thinking in the next 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. You're not thinking 5-10 years down the line, right? I think my great grandmother's with 100% Potawatomi Native American here in the States. Wasn't the States then, it was, Native American. But a lot of Native Americans had this generational concept where they would think like 7 generations ahead with a lot of the current decisions they would do. How they treated the land, how they treated the animals. And I'm not going to sit here and act like they had everything figured out, but there's a reason studying Native American culture or any indigenous culture is kind of unique. Sometimes we've gone backwards in some thinking. While we've advanced a lot as a society, there's some things I think we've backed off of, and thinking about other people and next generations, just having that longer term vision might change some decisions you're making right now. So I would say for you, don't look for it. It will probably find you, but at least put yourself in situations that allows that serendipitous moment to happen. Meet people. Like at your age, you probably should only be home to work, since you work from home a little bit. Eat and sleep. Like all the other free time, unless you're having a party at your house, should just be out grabbing lunch with somebody. Even if you're going to eat alone, just eat alone in a bar where someone might sit down. You might strike up a conversation with the bartender. She introduces you to somebody. You know, I mean, like when I went to Spain, I didn't go to Spain to find a wife. I just went there to, actually, it was a suggestion, I think, of my dad. He's like, yeah, you should try to go to another country where you don't know the language great and go by yourself. So I went to Spain by myself for 3 weeks in 1999, 2000. And I specifically avoided hostels because at hostels, I knew I'd be more likely to meet other Americans or Canadians.
Oh, yes.
And then I'm like, not even learning Spanish. I'm not learning, nothing against Canadians, but like it's so similar to U.S. culture that like, so I stayed in pensions, which is like you would hit a buzzer and like rent a room from someone's house. I don't even know if they do that anymore, but it was really cheap. And they kind of come downstairs, open the door, look at you, and like, oh, you look safe. Come and stay in our house.
Yeah.
They make you breakfast. They showed a map because back then we didn't have Google Maps. And they're like, oh, you should go here next. And I just did that for a month.
Cool.
And the last couple of days I was there, I bumped into my future wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
Couldn't have planned that. But because you were out.
Yeah. So like, I'm curious, do you have like a goal that you're going to meet somebody?
To be honest, I think that my mindset around it has been pretty good. Like in the sense of just like, I do have a belief that it will naturally happen. Like I'm confident that I will find that person. But at the same time, I haven't been in a relationship myself, like in maybe 2.5 years. And so it's easy to like in the beginning of that to like really just like full believe in that. But I am starting to feel like now, like after 2.5 years of no relationship with a woman at all, like I am feeling a bit of like some like feminine energy being around, like having someone that's like my ride or die. I do feel a bit of like, damn, like I want that. But in terms of a goal, I don't necessarily have that.
I just don't like when people put too much pressure on that. It's like unnecessary pressure.
Yeah.
And I don't care how you meet people, online, at a bar, naturally. Some people get arranged, whether it's through a friend or a traditional arranged marriage. Like, I don't think there's any one right path. It's just going to happen, right? There's just no way it wouldn't. It's human nature. It's going to happen. Now, you see a lot of online things and blogs nowadays that kind of, I think if you're on social media too much, you might read into this whole like, oh, well, there's only so many percentage of men and all the women are looking for the top 1%.
Yes, I see that. That's something I know well.
Yeah, listen, and I'm not, I actually like, what's the guy's name? He's kind of popular and talks about that because he's trying to help young men. He's an American guy, Galloway, I think his name is.
Okay.
Scott Galloway.
Oh, yeah. I love Scott Galloway.
Yeah. I like him too. I really do. For a lot of reasons. And, I even kind of stayed a little more politically opposite of where he is, but for some reason, I actually feel closer to the way he sees the world than a lot of people. So he's that guy is great. But I would say, while he's probably right with all the data, sometimes you can just look at things too logically. Mm-hmm. And I hate saying that because we're also talking about business. You do need to be logical about a lot of things. But like when we had kids, I was like, well, you know how much money it takes to have a kid, and we ended up having 3. Like if I would have just used all the math, I'd have been like, there's no way. Like one and done. We're out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But somehow we just said, you know what? That's what my wife wants. She envisioned this. She wants 3 kids. I'm just going to make it work. And if I have to work till I'm 80, I'll work till I'm 80. She's going to be happy. And that's how I looked at it. And then I just didn't know that we were going to grow and keep growing and make a little bit more money. And I didn't know we were going to be such minimalists and be able to save more than I anticipated. Right. Because I thought I was going to spend a lot more on other things. And we were just able to do it. My son's 16, so I could, 8 years, he's where you're at. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's like the news, right? You should be aware of the news. You should be aware of the facts and the data and what's typical, but you shouldn't be obsessive about it. And that's the problem with scrolling, is you're kind of reinforcing all the time with scrolling because it keeps going back to things that you like, the way the algorithm works. So it keeps putting in your brain like, oh, if I'm not the top 1% and over 6 feet tall, I'm not going to get the woman of my dreams. So it's just, you should be aware, but be careful what you repeatedly tell yourself. Why can't you be the oddball? Why can't you be the exception? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that advice, and kind of, I see almost like a link between between business and this relationship advice, where it's like from the overarching view, you don't want to be like too analytical and logical about it. You kind of want to have a bit of like this, like maybe it's delusion or like optimism or trust that like it will work out. It's like for in business, it's like you have the idea, you have the passion, and if you look logically, you're like, holy shit, the chances of me being the top 10% or 1% of this thing are really low, and it might stop you from doing it. But if you just stay more on the higher level and just have that belief and you just trust that it'll figure out, it's going to be hard, but you started and now you can go into the weeds and figure it out. And maybe it's similar to relationships, to just kind of like have that trust, take action, go, like you said, travel, go out, go to places where you can meet people, but have the trust. Don't listen to the analytics and the data, and have the trust that you will find somebody that is great for you. And I like how those two things kind of go together.
Yeah, it's not, having kids and relationships and marriage and all, it's not math. You can
Mm.
use math to look at things, but it is not a linear equation all the time. But when you backtrack and look backwards, you can use data to make it seem so. So I don't know. I just wouldn't care so much about it. And it's just put yourself in situations where it's just, because if you're grinding too much, you're never having any social interactions. Then you just, you're stacking the cards against yourself. At the same token, if you're doing too many social things, then you don't feel like you're getting enough work done, because you need to get work done in order to start to have a business and make money, which at some point, people want to, someone who's, I'm not saying you can't be a stay-at-home dad the rest of your life. There's plenty of good people that do that. But again, that's why it's nice to know the math. It's like, typically they're probably going to want someone who at least likes what they do and makes some money. Okay. So you got to put yourself in situations, and then just don't get too obsessive about whatever new data is making you think, oh my gosh, I'm not, again, going back to you're not 6'2" and make over 100,000 a year and have 10% body fat. Easier for me to say. I hit a lot of those markers, but physical traits. But I also met my wife when I was not at the most confident part of my life. I was really nervous. I wasn't sure what was coming next. I went overseas just for something to kind of do and see the world before I knew I had to get serious and grind for the next 40 years. I didn't know how long it was going to take. And, one of the things I like about that too is we met when we had nothing. So a lot of people meet when they have things. I have a lot of respect for divorced people who end up meeting new partners. Like, that must be so difficult to trust someone that, they're wanting you for you, and not just, well, I like him, but I also need someone who can provide. And, as you get older, those other things become more important. Monica and I met so young. We were one of the first of our friends to get married. I was only 26 when I got married. For us, that was quite young. I was the first of my group of friends. Most of my friends got married in their 30s, and I think a couple even in their 40s. While I'm not saying there's a right age to get married, we didn't have to go through that phase. And she just kind of knows who I am, because people, you change when you get some money. You do, right? I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just, how could you not? You're more confident, you're making more decisions. And, so just what it's going to happen, how it's happened. Maybe you meet someone when you have millions, maybe you meet someone next week. It doesn't really matter. You just need to know that it's going to happen. You got to put yourself in scenarios to make that happen, and keep working on yourself. One of the best, even in marriage, like the best way I can probably connect with my wife is to make sure I'm taking care of me. I have hobbies, I have friends that I hang out with. I want to stay fit for myself, and also just so I feel like, while it's not all about fitness, like, you've been married 25 years. It's not like you're as passionate physically as you were when you just met in your 20s, but it's not going to help if I have a dad bod
Yeah.
and I have no hobbies and I'm depressed. Right. So spiritually, I like to read. I like to stay connected. And then, back to the family thing, just, I know she really loves it when she can tell I'm really connected to the kids. It's a big value.
It's awesome. To touch a little bit on the self thing. You mentioned last time that you're really big on self-improvement. And I love how the first thing that you said when I asked you about values and mission and what helped you succeed was picking the right partner and having an awesome wife. But to go to you a little bit, back to the beginning again, what were some of those practices, habits that you did maybe on a daily, weekly basis to help you succeed in business and life?
Yeah. I think I got a little bit lucky in the beginning because I had good family roots. I was kind I was typically a good kid. So my mom and dad just had good values that I was a good human being toward others. I'm not going to say like I never got in trouble, but I wasn't a rebellious kid. My brother was.
Mm.
And
I can relate to your brother a little more.
yeah, yeah. And he ended up becoming an entrepreneur as well. He's a realtor and owns a paintball park in Florida,
Oh,
but
that's awesome.
yeah, but he was like, ahead of his time and, following there's a band called The Fish that was popular back in the day. And he like followed him around in a Winnebago, kind of like, and yeah, I used to actually get mad because my parents would always talk about his story, like he was more interesting. I'm like, I'm doing I'm doing the right thing. Why is everyone talking about him? But, there's just people just have different paths. I've always been an optimistic person. And then, my main hobby was basketball. I still love basketball. I played basketball all the time. So no matter what happened in business those first couple of years, I couldn't wait to leave and go play basketball, every
Mm,
Tuesday, Thursday night,
me
and
too.
just like I did in college and in high school. So I did that up until, honestly, until COVID started and they shut the gyms down. And then when they opened them back up again, I realized I was like the only one that was 50 and everyone else in there is 25, 30, 32. And I was like, I want to pick up some other things because I wanted to hang around people my age to have more friends that we had more in common with.
Yeah.
So it was really hard to give that up. I still play a little bit, but not like I used to. But that
Hmm.
was just had healthy habits and good friendships. And when I started meeting the right mentors, they were like, well, these are things that you should practice daily. Get up early, exercise in the morning, do something hard, read things outside of business,
Mm.
practice meditating or, praying more, go to seminars, travel, learn. It's, spend money on yourself, read self-help books. Those kind of used to be looked at like weird things 20 years ago. Tony Robbins and all these people. Nowadays, that's kind of cool. Everyone likes it because the social media got more popular. But back in the day, it was sort of looked at almost like weird cultish stuff.
Mm.
It basically is like a way to have this routine that you're protecting yourself against things that distract you from success, that can give you pleasure in the moment. Drugs, sex, alcohol, scrolling, negative movies, I just all these things that give you pleasure but take time. You only have so much time in the day, right? I used to like to watch a lot of sports too, and I still do, but I don't watch as much sports as I used to. I'm more
Mhm.
selective about what I'm going to watch.
Yeah.
Now my favorite thing to watch is my own kids. I never thought that would be my favorite thing to watch, even if they're not that great. Um, if my kids have become great at their own things, but I'm just saying you need to find time for pleasure, but you get to pick what those pleasures are and how much pleasure that you need. And again, and this is going back to that minimalist thing too. If you're not constantly, some people can't be alone for 2 hours. Like their biggest fear would be like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine being alone for 2 hours and doing nothing. All you have is a book, right? You can't look at your phone. You have to wait at a doctor's office, like just doing nothing. They would get so fidgety and move their leg. Like they're just not comfortable being alone. They constantly need to be entertained either by another human or with technology or something. So when you can just sit still and be content and happy with your life, that says a lot. And I don't think it's a lot of things people are good at.
Mm. It's an interesting thing. The tug between like reading and learning and studying, and then also like doing and action. My dad is very type A and is someone that like you don't need to read, you just need to get the experience in real life, and so I'm curious to know how much has like reading, let's say books and
Yeah,
studying, played a role in your success.
a lot. I would say I've probably spent a couple $100,000 in my career on seminars and flights and books and teachers and coaches. I've paid coaches to coach me, once a week, and you pay someone some sort of fee, whether it's about clinical knowledge to business knowledge to like a life coach. I do that myself now on the side as well. I have a couple um, different businesses on the side where I just, life coaching. I don't
Cool.
market it too heavy because I don't want it to upset the balance of my life. So I just kind of, I used to have a website and then I just kind of made it more word of mouth. So I'm not pushed to grow that. I don't have a specific goal to grow. I just enjoy helping other people. But my wife at one point during COVID was like, geez, you're giving so many people your time. Like, you have to be selective. I'm like, I know you're right. So maybe I'll charge for it. People tend to value things more too when they're paying for it. So I don't disagree with your dad. I think you do need to be decisive and make decisions and take action. I do think that for the most part, done is better than perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes people kind of have that analysis paralysis by analysis. They're analyzing and reading so much they just don't do anything and they're paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
So I would agree with your dad. I would also just say, why can't you do both?
I
It's
agree.
like a football game. It's like, I just think you win by. I heard defense wins championships. Yeah, but you don't throw your offense on the field, it's going to be a little harder to score.
Hmm.
So it's just a balance, right? And everyone's a little different. So you're a little different than your dad. So you might not be, to use that sports analogy, the same team as him. You just have
Hmm.
a different balance on how you like to see the world and how you operate. But he's not wrong,
Hmm.
right? You got to play
Yeah,
offense. You
100%.
got to take some risks. You got to get things done, and or delegate so it gets done faster.
Totally.
Yeah. So I don't think there's a perfect percentage.
Mm. Something you said earlier interests me. You said read books that are not to do with business. What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, it was particularly your like read outside your field. Read some fiction, read some history, um, read things that talk about what we're talking about, right? This random human interaction type things. Those like those are like the self improvement type books. Whatever you want to read. Just it's and I like to read physical books. I'm not against a Kindle or
Me
like
too.
you just technology so much. I like to underline things and dog ear pages. I get together once a week with two close friends. One is another entrepreneur, he's a contractor, and the other one is not. He's actually a PE teacher.
Oh,
But we're close friends, and we get together every week, and we don't always talk about things profound, but it's something we all look forward to, and we talk about family and laugh, and it's not poker night. It's not. In fact, we usually don't even drink because it's usually during the week, so it doesn't interfere with family time on the weekend. And just get some good food. We usually go to the gym, exercise, but get some really good food, talk, come home. All the kids are asleep. My wife's usually still up, but it's just I look forward to that day of the week, and I feel really balanced. It's like my midweek church, if you will, right? And everybody reads,
I love that.
so you might share books. So if I have a page that's dog-eared and highlighted, when I give that book to someone else, when they read it, they're like, "Oh, he found this page interesting. I wonder why." So it's like our own kind of internal book club.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Before we move on from like the self improvement uh, topic, I'm curious to know you mentioned like a bunch of different habits that kind of all collectively work together by having mentors, reading
Yeah.
books, going to seminars. Um, like if you had to pick one thing that changed you the most in terms of your growth with business success and as a person in self-improvement, like what was there one thing that you had to pick, if you had to pick, that made the biggest difference?
I mean, it's tough to say one thing, right? But I will say when I started booking flights back in the mid 2000s to go to seminars and hear other people speak and be around other people in the audience that were just like me, that were doing pretty good, but just knew there was something else out there. Let's go learn from someone else. And just to spend money when you don't have a ton to go learn from someone else who's charging a nice fee. That's because they're running their business model. Like some people just want to learn so bad, but then they just don't because it costs a couple $100, right? And maybe that one thing that you go out there just changes the gears in your mind. You come back with all this extra zip and energy. So I almost looked at seminars and conferences back then almost like a vacation. In fact, it got to be so important to me that I started taking most of my staff with me on these things. So
Cool.
they would grow too, right? Now sometimes that became a problem because then if they grew too fast, then they were like, "Oh, I'm gonna go back to school," which is great for them, but I'm like, "Oh crap, now I gotta start over and hire someone new," So um, it's a good problem. It's a good problem, but yeah, I want to invest in those around me, so I'm not keeping all those secrets to myself.
Mm.
I want them to grow as well. But yeah, I would say that was a big one. I do those things less at this point in my career. I actually just hosted my own a year and a half ago. I had an event here in Chicago. Well, when I met you last year, I was invited out to an event in Vancouver. I was the keynote speaker.
Uh-huh.
Right? That's another big one too. Speaking. Get up and speak in front of people. When you speak in front of people, which is a big fear, even though you might not be a lifelong public speaker, it just changes something to your frequency, your vibration, the way you see yourself. You're more confident. You can walk in a room and know that I can talk to everybody out loud. It just does something to you.
Mm.
So even if you don't need to speak for your business, you don't need a podcast, you don't need it. Like sign up for like some speaking club, Toastmasters or something. It will change you when you speak in front of people. It's hard.
Yeah,
But then it feels so good when you're done.
that's amazing. That's amazing. I've been thinking about that a lot, actually, doing like a Toastmasters club or something like that. It's a scary thing for sure.
Yeah. So, but it's like it's hard to look at that as something like, oh, I'm gonna go do that, and that's gonna help my business grow. Because like, there's no like, how does that help my business grow if I don't really speak? you clearly speak here I mean, you're running podcasts, right? And I think that's what you call this.
Yeah.
So that would definitely benefit you for your work. It benefited me because I hosted lectures for patients, right? And so I,
Yeah.
rent out restaurants and have like 50 to 100 people come and talk on some topic for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
People liked what I had to say, and some people would come into our office because of that, right? You know, but more than the direct line of revenue it would get from delivering value in your words, just the personal growth of being afraid of standing up and giving a presentation. It's kind of one of those when you do something you're afraid of, you get stronger.
Mm. Yeah,
So
for
just
sure.
being able to just walk tall, walk into a room and feel confident, no matter who's in that room, no matter their level of wealth or their level of knowledge, just to be comfortable with yourself. Like that's something that some people just never achieve.
I love both of those. Back to the like how one of the biggest things you said was going to seminars and like booking flights, like paying people to go and be in an environment. I'm sure there's like a ton of benefits from booking that flight and going to
Yeah.
a seminar.
I remember a guy told me once, maybe, I don't know, 2009 or 10. He was probably my age or older at that time. He's like, Heath, when you go, you grow. He meant that in a lot of facets. Get out of your business, trust your team. Are you coming to the next conference? I don't know. He's like, when you go, you grow.
Are there any specific seminars or people that you paid for their time that you can remember that had a
I
big impact?
particularly paid for people in my industry,
Oh, okay.
right? But there are other people, like for example, I gave you the example of this guy, Tony Robbins. I personally never been to one of his events. I saw a bunch of CDs and read books, but a lot of
Yeah.
people love going to his event, right? A lot of young people now, like there's a bunch of people online. There's the new guy. I think people find popular. This guy, Andy Elliott, is pretty popular right now. He's always taking his shirt off and showing his muscles. You may have seen him if you scroll and things like that. I don't know. He's got events. There's always some sort of like seminar in Miami with all these new young entrepreneurs that are, growth summits. They're called so many different things, right? I'm sure you've seen these things advertised
Of
online.
course. Yeah.
Like if one resonates with you, make that one of your vacations, right? Go down there a day early, enjoy it, go to the seminar, meet some new friends who are all trying to grow. And then probably you'll just, after that event, have a new friend that's trying to hustle like you are. And now you got someone you can chat with every week. You're growing together. You need to have friends who want to grow together. If you're the only entrepreneur in your circle, it's kind of a lonely ride.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Um, I want to ask you something that's a little different from what
Okay.
we're just talking about, but it's something that I have been thinking about a lot, and it has
Yeah.
to do with decision making. I've just been thinking a lot about, and it's not like the quick decisions that you want to be decisive, right? But it's more so about like the big decisions that you have to make in your life, like choosing the new job or starting that business or quitting something. Like I'm curious to know, what is your process in business and life when you have a decision that you have to make and it's something you think over? What's that process look like for you?
I need to be, since I was your age, right? Once a week, I need to be alone and have a meal and have an open planner with pen, and I just eat and write. I
Cool.
plan my week. I write some mini goals. Sometimes I'll do a planning session. Sometimes it's 2 hours. I write out, just some visualizations, some things that, what will make me feel like a fulfilled life in 10 years, the long-term vision, then work backwards. Well, okay, if that's going to happen, what would I need, financially in order to make those things happen? And then just work backwards. And then how do I do those things within my own value system? So a lot of time thinking and writing. She's going to call back again in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Why don't you
Okay,
take
cool.
what you have here to work with? I'm happy to get on another call.
Yeah, no problem. If you have to go right away, that's no problem. The only thing I wanted to ask you was,
Yeah.
if there was anything that I didn't ask you that I should have.
I mean, life's not supposed to be easy, right? And you're gonna have moments where you think it's easy. When it's easy, something's always coming. You got to figure out the next little. It's just this big game, right? But look, I think you're winning, man. You're thinking about a lot of things. Someone else might be out there, 24, already working their first job and making them 200 grand a year or whatever it is, and think that they're already set. Like, oh man, 24, I made it. I'm like, you didn't. You didn't. In fact, I'll just give you one little story. When I went to Spain, when I was about your age and eventually met my wife, I was 24, right?
Wow.
And I had a friend working here in Chicago that did a more traditional path, and he was working for a consulting company in the late 90s, probably making 150 grand, which is a lot of money 25, 30 years ago. right? And he hated his job, man. He was just crunching numbers and doing things. He was underappreciated. He found out I was in Spain. He's like, "Can I go meet you over there?" I'm like, "I was really going to do this trip by myself." We were back then. They had internet cafes. He kept hounding me, sending me an email once a week when I'd check my email at these internet cafes.
Yeah.
Man, those are fun. They should bring internet cafes back. Get
Yeah.
rid of your phones. Just check your email at an internet cafe once a week. Right? So much healthier than the constant checking of messages. Anyway, I finally said, like, all right, fine. I'm here for 3 weeks. I'll meet you in Madrid the last 3 days of my trip. Right? I met him in Madrid, and I met my wife the next day when I was with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And so my point is, then he eventually like got out of that field, and he started strong, but then didn't get into all the personal growth and development, and things just didn't work out for him. He started strong, thought he was comfortable, and then it wasn't. I'm not going to say what's happened since then, but I'm just saying everyone has a different path. So don't compare yourself to other people just because they're doing something right now that looks easy or they've made it. They haven't. No one makes it. I don't care how much money you have or how many good things are happening. There's always a new challenge. No one's comfortable. And if they are, they're lying. I'm not saying you can't have more comfort and have less fear. Like I definitely had way more fear at your age, a lot more.
yeah.
The fears just change. They change, right? It's normal to have fear. It's normal. So just appreciating these symptoms that you have, and that you will always, as long as you keep it going, right? Keep meeting with the right people, keep hanging out with the right friends, just put yourself out there. Sit down once a week, write, get things that read, go learn from people, live beneath your means, be patient, put some money away when you start to make some money. And it just, like a squirrel, it just starts to add up. And you just develop this little power. And then all of a sudden people start looking up to you and asking you questions. Then you're helping other people than just in your business. And that's success to me, man. When success to me is when more people come to you with problems that you can solve. There's some people out there that make a very humble salary, and they have tons of people coming into them for help and wisdom, right? It's not just the people who are making a lot of money, right? Hey, if you want to do both, more power to you. There's just levels to this. That's all. But you're winning because you're asking questions. Most people don't. Right? You're helping a lot of people. Someone's going to watch this. Someone's going to get something out of this, and that's why I wanted to give you the time for this. You need me for anything else? Let me know. I'm happy to do something else. But today, I think my wife's going to call back any minute. We haven't seen each other in a week, and I don't want to keep hanging up on her.
No, fair enough. Heath, thank you so much, man. You've made a massive impact on me, and so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we'll stay in touch too. And like I said, one of my closest friends is in Vancouver, so I'm always up there at least once a year. So when next time we are, we'll connect. And if you're in Chicago, you make sure you same.
I will for sure. Thank you so much.
All right, talk to you soon. I want to see that. Don't lose this one. I want to see the clip.
I won't. You will.
All right.
All right.
Have a good weekend. Happy Halloween.
Yeah, happy Halloween.